Getting students to engage in a Zoom meeting can be a challenge. Let's look at how we can use a pretty non-invasive way to get students engaged through using the chat. First of all, from your perspective, why would you use this? One reason is it's really easy for everyone in the group to use. There's not a lot of teaching to go on to use this particular tool. It also can give you some quick feedback as your meeting is progressing. So you could do a question at the very beginning before things actually get started, in the middle, are they still listening? Do I still have them? Again, at the end, maybe an exit ticket kind of thing. And the chats can be planned or spontaneous. So you can have questions that you know in your lesson building that you want to ask, or they can be spur of the moment based on what's happening. You can ask some questions at that particular time. In listening to a video called 5 Creative Ways to Use Chat Feature on Zoom to Spark Engagement, here are a few things that I took as takeaways from those. One was to use the chat as an unofficial start. So at the very beginning of class, maybe as soon as you get your meeting started, you put out a chat question, and as students are rolling in, then they answer that question. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind. With the chat, when you put something in the chat, only people in the meeting at that specific time will see it. So say, for example, you put your question in chat and then 10 more people joined later, they wouldn't see that initial question. So you may have to think about, if you're going to do this, where could you put the chat question so that as soon as they came in, they could see it. I did verify that if you have your screen shared, when someone gets admitted into your room, they're seeing that shared screen right away. So perhaps you could have your question up on a slide. Now, this question might be something that is just a connective kind of question, or maybe it's something that truly relates to your lesson that you want to ask them about to get them thinking about something with your lesson. The next one they mentioned was allowing for intentional side conversations. And I put a lot of question marks under this one because I'm not quite sure if this is good for our students or not. It depends on how they could handle it. I have been in conferences before where they allow these side conversations, and they've been wonderful because somebody asks a question and one of the participants can actually answer it without the host having to answer it. However, that may be more difficult because we're dealing with younger individuals rather than all of us dealing with adults. So that was just one to think about, that it might be okay depending upon your group and depending upon what kind of... If you've set up some guidelines for students, then this might work. Another one that may be helpful is this avoid groupthink. And let me explain that a little bit. This is where you ask a question and you ask students to put it in the chat, but not push return or enter right away until you say go. And then what happens is all of the responses come out at once so that each person is giving their own answer without being influenced by others. And then you can see all of the responses. Now, this one does take a little bit of training because I've been in sessions where people have done this before, and some people don't listen to directions. They put their answer in and they push return, and then the other answer is right out there. So you may want to practice with that one a little bit, but I could see this one being good for getting some whole group participation, but not being influenced by other people's answers. Another one is just simply a complete the sentence, and you put out a sentence and they have to finish it, and obviously hoping that it's relating to your lesson and getting them thinking, those kinds of things. Finally, one they mentioned was if you're going into breakouts to have some conversations, and by the way, breakouts can be things that you do really rather quickly. So if it's a turn and share, you could quickly create a breakout room, have it set so it automatically sends them, and then have it set so it automatically brings them back within a short period of time. So they get a quick out, have the conversation, and come back. This idea with the chat is after the group returns, then ask a question in the chat to get people to see and hear, in a sense, read what other people had talked about in their particular breakout rooms. So one question that they suggested is putting in what struck you about those conversations. And using the word struck you, never thought of it this way before, but using the word struck you actually brings in both the thinkers and the feelers. Instead of saying, how do you feel about these conversations, or what do you think about these conversations, what struck you kind of brings both groups in. So I thought that was kind of interesting. A few things for you to consider on your end. Give students enough time to respond. So think about that virtual wait time, just like you do in class. So they, especially that initial one, they may have to open their chat and then type something out and give them enough time to respond. It's also a good practice to read aloud the questions that are posted in the chat or on slides, just like you would say them out loud in class. And this one, I know this is a long shot, but if you ever can get help monitoring a chat, that would be great. So maybe you have another adult in your classroom and they're there for a specific student, but they could also help monitor the chat. So if that would ever be possible, that would be great. Couple of quick tech things in here. You can, during your meeting, quickly change the chat to private. And so, for example, if you're asking a question and you don't want everybody to see each other's answers, you could quickly change it to private, so when they respond, it only goes to you and they can't see each other's answers. Now, if you're trying to promote more kinds of discussion and thinking, then obviously you'd want to have it out to everyone. But just know that in your meeting, you can quickly switch back and forth for them to be able to post to everyone or only choose to chat privately. The other thing you can do is in the chat, there are these 3 little dots, and that's where you can actually change it from private to everyone. But there's also a way to save the chat in there. So if you wanted to go back and look at the chat afterwards, you could actually save it. I hope this gives you some ideas on how you can use chat in your Zoom meetings.